Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming back after lunch. So as Miranda said, my name is Jen, so I'm the new Jen at the PSC in ethology, so we don't even change names, after one. So today is actually the first time I'm standing in front of most of you. So actually I changed a little bit of my title, I hope you don't mind. So I kind of want to get this opportunity to actually introduce myself to you, what I did before, what I intend to do after I start here. And I also hope that I can take this opportunity to know more about you as well. So please come and chat with me if you're interested. So I'm going to just, first talk to you a little bit about me. So I'm originally from Taiwan, and I'm an applied ethologist and animal welfare scientist. So since I work with behavior and welfare, so I will think that it's most appropriate I first share with you what's my view on animal welfare. So what is animal welfare? I like to use the 5 domains model proposed by Miller. So basically, animals have some basic needs, the basic domains that we want to fulfill them. So for example, they need good environment, they need good nutrition, of course. They also need to express the behaviors that are important to them. And also, of course, they need good health. So these are the basic needs, basic domains. So what happens if those needs are not met? So then we end up having animals not so good. They may be thirsty, hungry. They can get sick. They are frustrated. They can be fearful of us, and then they can be stressed or even distressed. So this is not the animal we want to see, right? So once the 4 basic domains are met, we actually see a good pig, which is actually in a good mental state. So I think the last domain, which is the mental state, is sometimes overlooked, but I think it's very important. Actually, it connects all the basic needs of the animal, so which constitute actually the 5 domains, and that's where we will see an animal that is really thriving. So then I will take you a little bit, why I started work with animal welfare and a little bit of my journey through the pig world, basically. So here I am. I'm from Taiwan, as I said. So we're so small that you cannot see on the map at all. So let's use a magnifier. So this is kind of the island of Taiwan. How small are we? So I found this on the internet. So basically, the red is Taiwan still. The blue one is actually the Vancouver Island. So now you get some ideas of how small the island is. So, but on that small island, we actually have 24 million population, and actually, the pig industry is our #1 livestock industry there. We have a very strong food culture. I grew up eating pork, and then we also import a lot of pork as well. So I think that's also what brought me to work with pig welfare when I first started. So I really wanted to do something for the pigs. So what was I doing there in Taiwan? Actually, I didn't start off as working with animals right away. So I actually did my first master's in Taiwan, where I'm actually from the social science background, where I studied actually scientists and how science developed. And during that time, I also worked with some dogs, because I think you probably don't know that we have quite a serious stray dog issue in Taiwan. So I ended up writing a master thesis on human-dog relationship in Taiwan, which is very interesting. And also at that time, I started to work with an NGO that is still kind of the first and the only one that actually started bringing people's attention to the concept of farm animal welfare. So I was starting to translate a lot of the research from Europe and North America on South Seoul into Taiwan. So that's kind of how got me into working with animal welfare. And then later, I just moved all the way across the continent. I wanted to be trained professionally in this field, so I went to Edinburgh, and I did my second Master of Science at the University of Edinburgh, where I actually did a project on cell enrichment, which I will talk a little bit about in a second. And then later on, I just couldn't stop. I did also my PhD with Edinburgh, but I was based in Ireland, and I was investigating a very interesting topic, which is tail biting, and I will also tell you a little bit more later. And after I graduated, I also served as a global animal welfare advisor for an NGO. And later, I just moved yet again across the Atlantic and then to Pennsylvania. So I worked as a postdoc at the University of Pennsylvania. And then there, I also started a project on sow housing, which is a very important issue, of course, and I will explain a little bit to you also later. And then later, I just moved back again across the Atlantic, back to Europe, and then I did another postdoc in Ireland, Austria, and France, where I study pigs' social environment. And here I am, moved yet again across the Atlantic again in the middle of Canada. So I'm really happy to be here, actually taking the footsteps of Jen Brown and also Harold Gangyu before her. And then I'm sure that I will be doing a lot of interesting projects with you also here in Canada. So during my journey through pig behavior and welfare research, I always had this, I always use the approach of really trying to solve some challenges and problems we have in pig production in relation to pig welfare. So I use this solution-driven approach, really tackling the issue of tail biting, sow housing, and then enrichment, all these things. And I think this ability to be able to tackle this real-life issue really motivates me. And also this aligns with the PSC's ideal, and that's what I'm hoping also to achieve here. So next, I'm just going to give you some flavor of some of the projects I did before. The first one is that when I was in Edinburgh, I worked with actually small static group housing for sows. So during that time, we have sows on solid floor. This is in Scotland, so they do have access to some straw, and then they're using individual feeding stalls. And one of the main issue of welfare issue for this type of housing is, of course, aggression. They're in small groups, right? And then so by the work before, including Harold, that we know that space allowance, feeding, group size, and also resource enrichment and their dominance hierarchy can all affect their level of aggression. So at that time, we introduced a new enrichment device, which is a brush like this, and to see how that actually affects cell's aggression level. And later, during my PhD, I actually moved on to grower and finishers. So I was trying to investigate the issue of tail biting in pigs housed in fully sighted systems. As some of you may know, actually in the EU, routine tail docking is not permitted anymore. So the producers, they're really trying to figure out how can we actually have pigs with undocked tails in fully sighted system. So at the beginning of my PhD, actually, I started a lot of study investigating wood as primary enrichment, because actually you can see here is a world map. So we actually asked the Irish producers, what do they think about when they think about enrichment? So actually they mentioned a lot about wood. Some of them are using wood. Some of them are unsure whether wood is an appropriate enrichment. So that's why we investigated. And what we found was that actually wood is quite safe for pigs to use. But then actually, depending on which type of wood you give to the pigs, actually will affect the level of interaction they have with the wood. So later, we started to really trying to rear undocked pigs in fully sighted systems. So the first idea we had was, okay, now we know that wood is good. So what about we combine that with some dietary treatment? So we tried to use high fiber diet because we thought that by increasing the satiety in pigs, maybe they will be more calm, they will be less active, so they would do less tail biting. But this study didn't turn out so well. I actually had to deal with a lot of tail biting outbreaks. So later, we actually switched to another strategy, to trying to see, okay, can we think of some more different types of enrichment, but that are compatible with sighted floors that we can give to the pigs. So this is just to give you a snapshot of, we are being creative. We just thought about all the different types of enrichment we can actually put in sighted systems that will not affect the slurry. So this study actually turned out quite okay, and then the tail biting is much improved. I will just now show you pig videos. So this is one of our pens. You can see fully sighted floor, and we gave them a range of different enrichment items. So one of them is the elevated rack. So I gave them grass because in Ireland, we can get grass really for free. So I gave them that. And then we also have some wood on the wall there, something hanging over there, and also some other items on the floor, the rubber toy as well. And you can see that these pigs have tails, and they are 2 weeks after weaning very active. Okay, so they are, you can see that they are starting to, some of them start to nibble on their pen mates. They're doing some behavior we don't want to see. But what we do want to see is actually by giving them meaningful enrichment, it can actually keep them occupied and keep them distracted and keep them from doing more of the damaging behavior that we don't want to see. So actually you can see that they are very happily engaged with all the enrichment and also stimulate them. So what do I mean when I say the differences between the two studies? I'm just going to give you one graph to show that. So in this graph, you can see, so the red one is the first study I mentioned that we only use one enrichment with high fiber diet, and the blue bar is the one that we use multiple enrichment. And here I'm showing you the percentage of pigs that have their tails amputated when they go to slaughter. So you can see that actually we are much improved. So in the previous study, we only managed to have 1/3 of the pigs who have not been tail shortened at the end of the production cycle. But in the second study, more than 70% managed to do that. And also similarly, that we see a great difference in the mild amputation scores. So actually, we will have, if you want to know more details about it, we will have an article in our upcoming annual report, so in July. So please feel free to check our website for that for more details, or please feel free to come talk to me as well. So the next study I was involved in was done in Pennsylvania. So I was working under Professor Thomas Parsons. And in that unit, we actually have electronic cell feeder, dynamic cell herd, and then they are slightly floored, but then the cells do have access to straw pit and an outdoor concrete run because this is an organic farm. And so during that time, I'm sure most of you know about Proposition 12. So in Pennsylvania, actually, most of the pig farmers, they already transitioned to group housing, but they are indeed still using mating stalls during the post-weaning time for artificial insemination. But then if you want to be compliant with Proposition 12, you cannot use mating stall either. So that's where kind of prompted us to really study what's going on in this period post-weaning. This is a very sensitive time for the sows because they just come out of lactation, and this is a very important time for them. So we basically want to compare if we put the sows in stalls or in individual pens or in small groups, will that have any effect on them in terms of welfare? So what I want to show here is just we really try to use a range of different welfare measures to really understand what's going on in this period of time. So we use different behavior measures. We also recorded the lesions. We have used an assessment method to actually try to understand their subjective experience going through 7 days in the stalls, and also some behavior tests, and also to see what's the long-term impact on them depending on different housing treatment. So the message I want to say here is just what we found is that actually group housing is not just about the space that we give them. It's really also about providing them the opportunity to have proper social interactions, which is quite important for pigs because pigs, after all, is social animals. So we really want to keep that in mind when we talk about group housing. The last study I want to just introduce you is also the last study I did before I came here. So I was trying to understand how pig social environment can actually have some consequences on their health and performance and welfare. So I think that idea really came to me when I was doing my tail biting study. Sometimes we have to deal with tail biting outbreaks, right? So when you have some outbreaks, you can actually manage to, we manage to control it by doing some intervention. So during that intervention, sometimes we have to remove some pigs, but we find a way to actually introduce them back to their home pens so that we're not taking a limited space. We can actually manage tail biting within the space we have. But during all this removal and reintroduction of pigs, I was just wondering, are we also doing something to the pigs that we don't know? Maybe there are some consequences of that. So we are also trying to use an external aid to see if we can actually stabilize the social grouping and whether there are also some benefits to that. So we use a type of pheromone for that. And then in the long term, we want to know that whether by giving the pigs a more socially stable environment, whether we can mitigate some of the behavior issue we don't want to see, for example, excessive aggression or tail biting later. So we really want to understand that whether by giving them, providing them with more social stability, whether they can improve animals' health, performance, and welfare, and whether that will be cost beneficial for the producers. So that's enough about me. So I'm just now going to give you a quick recap on what has been done so far here, what's happening here in terms of sow welfare in general. So I want to just kind of give a recap on the code of practice. We know that it has been reviewed in 2019 to 2021, and I'm just highlighting some of the recommendations coming out of the review panel. We know that now we have a tentative new deadline for transitioning to group housing until hopefully July 2029. And then also we, in the review, it is also recommended that this, for the sows and gills that remain installed should have some type of effective and functional enrichment. And the minimum space for group house cells is recommended to make it a requirement instead of a recommendation. I think this is important just because you have to provide them with a good group housing environment so that to make sure that you can actually go through the transition properly. And then also it is recommended that the boars should be housed in pens. So this is the projection done by the Canadian Pork Council back in 2019. So we're now 2024 already, so hopefully we're now about 60% of the producers managed to transition or in the process of transitioning. And then in 2029, we're trying to hit that goal there. And also just to kind of refresh your memory a bit, if you were here in last year's Spring Producer Meeting, so Jen Brown actually she talked about we need to really care more about the risk factors for sow mortality, and because we're actually seeing an increase in sow mortality during the transition, right? So she was making some recommendation to you, including tracking your sows better, what types of treatment you're giving to them, and also training your staff to be better cope with the transition and making timely decisions, and also focus on the development of replacement gills, and also keep an eye on your mortality records. So some of these points will be addressed in our new project, which I will talk about it later. And then also we are hoping to get another, if we get the funding approved, then we will also try to see that if there are some tools, practical tools to help the producers to make some timely decisions on farms. And also just to bring your attention to a project that will be soon, is actually concluding soon, also led by Jen and then Abby, our MSc student. So in that project, they're trying to actually identify practical enrichment that can be applicable on farms. So they're trying 4 different types of enrichment, including like rope and burlaps, rubber tour, rubber mat, and also, like Miranda mentioned earlier, the scented newspaper. So I'm just going to show you some of the first look of the results. So basically the pigs, they have either the enrichment during the early life or they don't. And then also similarly in later life, that's after 9 weeks of age until market. And now we can see that actually you can see a difference in the average state again in the 18 to 21 weeks of age, which is something that is really positive. And also here you can see, just keep your eye on the yellow and the blue. So the yellow one is the pigs that have been enriched with enrichment, and then the blue is the one that didn't have the enrichment. So you can see the huge difference in terms of the manipulative behavior we're seeing, both in terms of tail, ear, and belly, and total manipulation. So which is showing that actually this enrichment is indeed effective. So what are the immediate next steps that's going to happen in PSC ethology group? So the first project that will be soon starting is a thermal profile project. So this project will be led by a PhD student we just recently recruited, Serge. He's going to look at the different pigs' thermal profile. So some pigs, we're using the 3D thermal cameras to see that whether they have different thermal profiles, and then how actually that relate to their feed efficiency and their stress response. And then we will also test that using in-water nutritional supplements. And then later we want to see that whether we can actually adjust the diet of different heat increments to see that whether we can actually further improve their performance and then also improve their response to stress. Another study that will also soon starting in fall this year is the ESF data. So we're going to do some exploration on that. We're working with a commercial producer who has herds that they are already transitioned towards group housing, but they also have some herds that are still stall housing sows. So we will then use all the big data we collect from these producers. Then we can compare. So under similar management, are there any differences, in terms of performance, welfare, etc., between the different herds that have different housing? And then we are going to, look at the relationship between the ESF feeding data pattern and then their performance and the sow social behavior. So this will be done by a master's student we recently recruited, Sean. And then the second part of the study will be based on what we found in the first part. Then we will design some intervention to be applied on farms, focusing on gill retention and then training on how they use ESF. And then we will also, of course, do an economic analysis to compare different housing and then the different intervention we use. And the next new study, very exciting, is the loose lactation study where we're going to conduct maybe starting next year. So of course, loose lactation is a still quite new concept in Canada, but we really want to stay ahead of the game. So especially now that we have some loose lactation system already entered the Canadian market, so we can actually work with the commercially available system, the manufacturer, local manufacturer on this. So we're going to compare loose lactation pens and the conventional gestation lactation crates, and then to see how the piglet performance, welfare will be different, and then comparing different weaning time, and then also the availability of the nesting materials, and then to see that whether it affects the nursery performance. And also we will also take feedback from the farrowing staff to see how they feel working with different lactation systems. The last study that will also soon be starting next month is the creep feed study. So I think the creep feed is also a very important subject, and then we want to really understand what to feed to the piglets that will be beneficial. So we're going to compare a couple of different commercially available creep options, and then to compare the piglet growth and their gut development, and then also their blood iron, and then also to see whether there may be some differences between the small and big pigs in terms of how they respond to creep feed. So, furthermore, in the longer term future, what are my plans to do here? So I just want to tell you something more about what my plans are. So I think the first thing is the code of practice will soon be updated. So I will also be involved as a scientific committee, and then it's a very exciting opportunity again working with the industry and the other stakeholders to really update the code of practice so that we can ensure that we are providing the best care for the pigs. And then I will also, because enrichment is still a very subject that's close to my heart, so I will definitely try to find some optimal enrichment that we can actually apply on farms in Canada. I think it's very important that we actually find some enrichment strategy that can be applied locally, and then we can actually find the proper item that's meaningful for the pigs, but also feasible on farm. So I will be working with Yolande on this subject. And I'm also a person that really cares about sharing experience. I think we have some producers that have already transitioned towards group housing, so we really want to be able to actually, let people know about how they do that, and then will that be able to help the others for the transition. And I also have some overseas contacts in Europe. So of course in Europe, transition towards group housing is already 20 years ago, but I think there's still some valuable experience that we can learn from them, and then to help us better transition towards group housing. And we all know that we now have also a new sow culling plant, and then we will also want to do some study there to understand more about the reason of sow culling, what the mortality, and then how we can actually make better decisions. And I also believe that really pig welfare is not just the responsibility of the producers, right? So we need to understand more about the consumer side of things, and then how we can actually provide more incentives for the producers to actually do better in terms of welfare. So I will want to do some studies on consumer labeling, And last but not least, I'm also really interested in the concept of one welfare. So basically, how can we improve human welfare by improving animal welfare? I think this is a very important point, especially for people that work day to day with animals. So this is also something that I want to investigate in my time here. So before I finish, I'm just going to share with you a story, a true story. So this time when I went back to Taiwan during Christmas, so now in East Asia, actually, so I just said that because we eat a lot of pork, right? So we also import pork from other countries. But so the country of origin thing is a really kind of big thing in Taiwan, and I believe in East Asia as well. So I go to this restaurant, and then on the menu, you will always see that the country of origin for all the dishes that you want to order. So I'm just taking one example. It's not the same menu I saw, but then this is one example. So here you can see. So this is the pig head icon, so which means that these dishes contains pork. And then the next thing you will see is, okay, so they put Taiwan first. Of course, that's our country, so Taiwan comes first. So you say, okay, we have pork from Taiwan in these dishes. And what do we have next? We actually have Canada next. And then we also have some EU countries, for example, Netherlands and Spain. So at that time, I would just start wondering, so when people see this, what are they associating, pork from different countries are? So like my friends told me that, oh, okay, this pork from Europe, I know that they're very efficient, and then the welfare standards are good, so I like that. So I will just leave you a question, really, what do we want people to think about when they think about pork from Canada? So on my part, I would say that I would hope that when people think about pork from Canada, they also think that yes, they're all very efficient, the pork is safe, and also they have a better welfare standard that's actually initiated by the producers and for the producers. So this is why I'm here. I'm hoping to achieve alongside you. So I hope that this is what we're going to do together. So finally, just to acknowledge some of the collaborators, funders I worked with before, and also the funders and collaborators I'll be working with in the near future. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.